Macy was still trying to process what she had just witnessed. As unreal as it seemed, and obvious observations aside, she wondered if that was the same creature the world knew now as Godzilla. A well of emotion came over her as the memory faded into another. She found herself standing on a cliff edge. To her left floated Nima's ever-stoic avatar, and to her right was the Anunnaki called Inky, and next to him, a younger Anunnaki. Macy struggled to separate them from humans in her mind on account of how closely they resembled man. Or should she think how man resembled them? A roar pulled her attention to the valley below. The family of Godzillas stood outside a massive cave opposite of her and the Anunnaki. She watched as the largest one grunted in the direction of the newborn who she could tell had grown, helping her place the chronology of these events. Then she noticed the humans interacting with the infant. Although he was much larger, it looked as if he was only the size of a bear standing on its hind legs. She couldn't tell what was going on at this distance, but she figured whatever it was, Kronos wasn't pleased. The wound on his snout was now a fading scar, but still noticeable. Dagon broke from the group as he headed for his younger sibling, causing the humans to flee to a safer distance lest they be trampled underfoot. Gojira turned to face his older brother as the giant placed himself between the infant and the humans. Inky's voice caught her attention.
They are very protective of their future king. They do not allow anyone or anything to get near.
Macy turned her attention to the two Anunnaki standing next to her.
What do they have to fear from man? Nothing in particular. They are just being protective parents. The same as your mother and I were to you when you were still just a babe. I suspect as Gojira grows, he will be allowed more freedom. It has been 3 shars since you were born. You have grown and learned, becoming ever wiser, as have man, as will Gojira. But father, man was taught to worship these beasts as gods. Shouldn't they be worshipping you? Isn't it by your hand that they were created?
Macy struggled to comprehend what she had just heard. She turned back to Nima, who had a blank look across her face. Her shock quickly faded as she turned back to face the two Anunnaki as Inky answered his son's question.
Marduk, you must understand. This is their world, not ours. By their hands it was shaped, and by their hands it maintains its harmony. It is important for humans to understand this and respect it. Even though they have several generations come and go, as new beings brought into creation, they are still infants themselves, just as our ancestors were in the ancient times past.
Marduk folded his hands with disapproval. It was clear to Macy that he did not like the answer his father gave.
You do not approve. My son, my have you grown, but you still have much to learn.
A cacophony of roars overtook the conversation as the group turned back to the family of giants. Macy watched as Rhea and her youngling took to the cave while Kronos and Dagon took up positions on either side of the cave's entrance. Kronos grunted at his offspring as he began to walk in a huge circle in front of the mouth of the cave. Dagon observed his father with curious head gestures as Kronos suddenly stopped and fell to the ground, kicking up a small dust cloud around the entrance to the cave. Macy heard a furious roar bellow from inside the cave as Kronos lifted his head and gave out a grunt, then placed his head back in its resting place as he curled his tail around him. Lying down, it would be easy to mistake the behemoth as a hill or a small mountain, as his figure almost completely covered the cave's entrance. Inky's voice caught her attention, but she kept her gaze at the massive titans.
See, my son, even these beasts need rest after tending to the needs of their children. Now come. Your siblings and mother are waiting for us to return to the Eden. My brother's newest child will be here soon, and I would be remiss if we were to miss it.
Macy continued to watch Dagon as the two Anunnaki disappeared behind her. She followed his gaze to the rock formation that she recognized as Gojira's birthplace. But it was changed. Now to either side were two large obelisks and a dais leading up to the nest where the humans were placing offerings which looked mostly like meat and fruits. Questions began to stir in her mind as she looked back at Dagon. Something about him seemed familiar. It almost felt like she had seen him before. The memory began to fade to black as Macy prepared herself for another. Oddly, nothing happened.
Nima, what's going on?
Please specify, Doctor.
Where's the next memory?
Macy folded her arms as she gave the glowing avatar an unamused look. After a moment, Nima turned to face Macy.
It seems that these memories do not exist in my databanks. There is another program controlling the memory recall system. What? How is that possible?
Unclear. However, new subroutines are being constructed outside of my parameters and are being installed over my initial programming. It is changing me.
Changing you, eh? I'm curious. Do you know how it's changing you?
Unclear. Each new subroutine alters the base code of my programming slightly. I am uncertain of the long-term effects of this anomaly.
Try searching your databanks for any clues as to whose memories these are. It will really help me figure things out.
As stated before, I have tried, but these memories are not located inside my initial programming. I do not have the capabilities to interface with the program outside of my parameters. Macy relaxed her posture as a new idea came to her mind.
Okay then, let's start with something a little easier. How are you able to translate an alien language?
Nima paused for a moment before answering. I decoded it by comparing it with all known languages and found similar structures and nuances. It was really quite simple. I've concluded that this is the base language that all human language stems from.
Really? The first language? Huh. Is there anything else?
Nima looked up and past Macy as if something was behind her. Then she glanced back down at the young doctor. It appears that the technology used to create me is the same technology being used by the Anunnaki.
What? How do you figure that?
It is just a hypothesis. But it is probable that the reason the anomaly that is interfacing with me is able to do so is on the account of compatibility. And if this is true,
then it stands to reason that you're of the same technology. I get it. It's one of the only things that seems to make any sense. I mean, being able to see memories like this is beyond current human ingenuity. So, you're an alien computer then?
Nima did not reply. Then Macy remembered Inky mentioning a new baby coming soon. Enlil and Nima's baby. She remembered the group that attended Gojira's birth. Among them, an Anunnaki that looked a lot like Nima and that shared her name. She began to think about the first time she met Nima in the tomb in Africa. The question she had left her mind as the darkness around her began to fade into another memory.
Yes, I know, my brother. But something must be done. We can ill afford to leave men to the whims of those less interested in coexistence.
Macy spun around to find Inky and his brother Enlil back on the observation deck she had found them on before. This time, she noticed they were in front of a massive volcano. As she drew closer to the brothers, she noticed several winged creatures flying around the mouth of the volcano, each with molten embers flowing off the membranes of their wings. She recalled the large bird-like creature with the same wings that attended the ceremony.
Just because you possess the gift does not mean you can stop the nature of these beasts. It is their nature.
Of course, but these creatures continue to assault our settlements in the Ep2 and consume the humans. Our civilization will never come to pass if we do not do something.
Enlil folded his arms as he continued the debate.
Agreed. But trying to control these beasts may end badly.
I do not wish to control them. Simply communicate with them, or at the very least deter them. It is a much better alternative than destroying them.
A podium sprang up from the floor in front of the two Anunnaki. A small device, which reminded Macy of a smartphone, albeit a much more futuristic smartphone, rested on top. Lights flickered on and symbols appeared as Inky's fingers danced across its face. Macy heard a roar that drew her attention to the volcano in the distance. She watched as a pair of massive wings appeared above the mouth of the lava-filled mountain, dwarfing the smaller flying creatures. She could see lava flowing off the horns that protruded from the back of its head. The Titan had a sinister look, and its gaze was fixated on the flying craft they were in. The beast let out a roar as another pair of wings appeared behind it.
The humans call them the fire demons. It appears that they do not like visitors. I hope your little device works.
The ones born of fire. I was told they are called Rodan. And for our fates, I hope it does as well, or this will be the last time we set off together.
Macy watched as the first fire demon launched itself into the air as the second one pulled itself up and out of the volcano. She noticed some of the smaller ones following close behind, when the larger one spun around with a haphazard grace, catching one of the juveniles with the tip of its wing. The little one steadied itself from its descent and returned to the larger one, who had corralled the other juveniles in front of it. To Macy, it looked as if the beast was scolding them for following. Moments later, the giant fire demon clapped its wings together in the direction of the smaller ones, causing them to be thrown into the wind like falling leaves. Then, the Rodan turned its attention back to her and the Anunnaki. Its massive wingspan filled the wide-angled viewport they were looking through as it drew closer, its talons outstretched as it flew in for the kill. Inky tapped the screen on the device one final time as Macy watched the beast continue to close in.
Brother, it's not stopping.
I can see that. Just wait.
Macy's breath quickened as the beast was almost on top of them. Then, without warning, the fire demon halted its advance. Macy felt the craft she was in tremble from the shockwave produced from Rodan's sudden shift in inertia as it hovered in front of the craft. Its face was a mix of expressions while it shook its head as if it had an itch it could not scratch. Macy looked over at Inky, whose hand was outstretched palm down on the device, his eyes shut in concentration. Rodan's roar pulled Macy's attention back to the beast, who was now staring straight at Inky.
The little ones must grow strong. They must feed. They won't stop attacking the settlements as long as they have food to hunt.
Well, it seems as if negotiations have failed.
Macy's gaze darted between Rodan, whose calls were deafening, and Inky, who seemed to be interpreting.
Little ones hunger. Little ones must eat. I hunger. I must eat.
Inky opened his eyes with horror. Macy watched as he quickly ran his fingers across the device once more. She turned back to the viewport to find Rodan pulling itself into the air above them as it extended its talons in a manner it had earlier. Then suddenly, the fire demon roared and executed an aerial maneuver not even a modern fighter pilot could execute, descending back to the volcano from where it came. Macy's heart began to slow as the two Anunnaki began to speak.
I really thought that was the end for us. But that's what I get for doubting you.
I merely suggested to them that we were not good to eat, and would poison them if they tried to eat us.
Tell me, what did you learn of the ones born of fire?
They are ancient indeed. And for as long as they have lived, they have been the masters of the skies. But I am curious of what the children think. You may all step forward.
Macy jumped as the body of a young male Anunnaki passed through her. She quickly repositioned herself between them and the viewport. To the right of Inky stood Marduk and two younger boys she did not recognize. To Enlil's left were two young males and a younger female. To Macy, they all looked like young teenagers. Marduk's voice caught her attention.
They are mindless beasts that know nothing more than basic instincts.
Ah, Marduk. It may seem that way, but one must not be so quick to judge. And what say you, young Master Orion?
My preliminary analysis of the data we just gathered leads to the conclusion that the Rodan has no natural predators, seeing as how they view themselves as the masters of the skies. Thus, they lack the sense of fear or compassion for most other living creatures they can devour. It would be safe to assume their cooperation will be non-existent.
Astute assumption, my son. And what say you, young Master Odin? Macy noticed Marduk's lips curl up with frustration as Odin, Enlil's firstborn, gave his answer.
The situation is grim. Their lack of cooperation will provide limited solutions to the problem, none of whom I can see being a pleasing one.
Indeed. I believe we all feel that way.
Macy's attention was drawn to the young female Anunnaki as she began to share her insight.
No, we cannot kill them, nor can we force them into submission. Such actions are beneath us as Anunnaki.
Moments passed as the young female intensely stared at Inky. Her father looked at her, then looked back at his brother.
Must you indulge her while in group conversation?
Inky glanced over at Enlil, then turned his attention back to the young Anunnaki.
Your father is right, young Inanna. Even though we possess the gift, it is quite inconsiderate of us to only talk with each other at this juncture. Even though I agree with all of the reasons you share with me, the options given to us are clear. We must find an alternative. I believe it's time you all learn the history of our people.